It's time for Recipe of the Day.
I never used to follow a recipe for chili. I just would brown some ground beef and throw the other ingredients into the pot and stir and taste until it tasted good. But sometimes it would be delicious and other times it would taste a little bit more like spaghetti sauce, just not as rich. It would be too liquidy, too thick. And like I said, sometimes it's really good and sometimes not as good. And so I made it my mission to create a perfect chili recipe that I would turn to over and over again. And this is it. It is the chili recipe to end all chili recipes. It is all the things that chili should be with nothing extra, no ingredients here that aren't pulling their weight. It is rich, beefy, and perfectly balanced. It is not smoky. It is not spicy. It is not acidic. It is not sweet. It tastes like chili tastes like in your head when you think of chili. Yes, do that right now. Think of chili. Imagine what it tastes like. This is that recipe. I will also just tell you that I made this for Super Bowl the other day and everybody loved it, even somebody who said they don't usually like chili. So even picky eater tested, this one is golden. Oh, I'll tell you for the Super Bowl recipe, what I did was I cooked some macaroni and I put it in a small slow cooker with a little bit of water just on low. And then we had the pot of chili and then there were some toppings. So I did some toasted panko breadcrumbs. I'll give you a recipe link for that in the show notes, and sour cream and shredded cheddar cheese and green onions. And then people made their chili mac bowls, macaroni noodles, a scoop of chili, cheese, green onions, panko, sour cream. So good. It was a hit for Super Bowl. It'll be a hit for any fun party night at your house, I promise. Okay, what makes this chili so good? Like I said, it has all the normal ingredients and nothing extra. We're just treating them slightly differently at a couple of points. Crucially, we are blooming the spices in some of the fat from the beef. Flavors dissolve in fat differently than they do in water. And often when we're making chili, we add the spices to the tomatoey liquid mixture after we've browned the beef. And then we add the tomato sauce or diced tomatoes or tomato paste, whatever you're adding. After we've added the liquid is when we add the spices. And that doesn't give them as aromatic, round, or rich a flavor. So instead, we're adding them to the ground beef before we add all those liquids and letting them bloom and really let out those flavors into the fat first. And then we're doing the same thing with the tomato paste. We're adding the tomato paste and we're leaving it there for a bit so that it can caramelize a little bit, cook out some of the raw tomato flavor and get some depth. So it is the same ingredient you're used to in a chili, but just treated properly so that we really get the full flavor out of them. So you're going to start with a large, wide pot, like a Dutch oven, set over medium-high heat. And to that, you're adding 2 pounds of ground beef. Now, you don't want to use a lean ground beef here because, as I said, we want to bloom the spices in some of the fat. So I go with an 80-20, which is like a ground chuck, and that's going to give lots of flavor and enough fat for sure that we can bloom those spices. So you're adding the 2 pounds of beef to the pot, spread it out as much as possible, and just allow it to brown well underneath before you start stirring and flipping it. So about 4 or 5 minutes. Then stir and cook, stirring just occasionally until it's no longer pink anywhere, another 3 or 4 minutes. Then push the beef to the side of your pot and skim off some of the fat, leaving behind just 2 tablespoons. Then put the beef back into the pot, just spread out, and add a medium onion that you've chopped up. And you're going to cook and stir that occasionally just until the onion is softened, 2 or 3 minutes. Then add 3 cloves of minced garlic, and we're going to go in with those seasonings. You'll add 2 tablespoons of chili powder, a teaspoon of ground cumin, and a teaspoon of dried oregano. And I'm just going to back up and talk about that chili powder for a second. This recipe is designed for you to use something that is just labeled chili powder. Nothing else. You don't want ancho chili powder or chipotle chili powder. You just want the standard chili powder. To me, that is what chili tastes like, and that's what you want to use. The other ones can be hotter or smokier, and so if you're using those, you're going to get a different flavor. And honestly, my son Jeremy, he did my sausage chili a few months ago. He was doing that recipe, and he grabbed the chipotle chili powder instead of the regular one, and we got a really spicy, smoky sausage chili. It was delicious, but not what he or we expected. And so you want the regular chili powder for this one. Okay, so you're adding that 2 tablespoons chili powder, a teaspoon each of ground cumin and of dried oregano. Stir that into the beef and then spread it out and just leave it for 60 seconds. This is where those spices are blooming in the fat that's at the bottom of the pan and coating the beef. Okay. Then you're going to add a can of tomato paste, a 6-ounce can of tomato paste, and stir that all through everything and then spread that out again and leave that for 60 seconds. So now you have the tomato caramelizing, those spices have been blooming. And at that point, you're adding 2 cups of unsalted beef stock, and you're going to stir and scrape up any brownings from the bottom of the pot. Some of the beef or the tomato stock, some of the beef or the tomato paste might have started to brown onto the bottom. Now we're going to lift that up using that beef stock and scraping the bottom of the pot. At that point, you are going in with a 28-ounce can of diced tomatoes. I tend to prefer the petite diced just because I like the small bits of tomato, but whatever kind is fine. And then a 15-ounce can of kidney beans that you've drained. Now, I just do 1 can of kidney beans in this chili because some people don't like the beans. And so this is just like a little bit, a nod toward there being beans without it being overpowering. If you love beans in your chili, I'd say add a second can or even do 1 can of kidney beans and like 1 can of black beans. Nice for variety. If you don't like beans at all, you don't have to add them. Skip them totally. When you add those diced tomatoes and the beans, you're also going to add a teaspoon of salt and a half teaspoon of black pepper. Give that a good stir, increase the heat to high, and bring it to a boil, stirring occasionally. Then drop the heat down to a gentle simmer and let it cook uncovered, stirring occasionally for about 20 minutes. It does not need longer than that. We already really bloomed those spices and toasted that tomato. We've given everything a chance to really meld together. Any longer, I find the beef starts to like crumble apart. It's just not as good. So just 20 minutes is all that you need here. Give it a stir and then taste it. If it's particularly acidic, which can happen, some cans of tomatoes are more acidic than others, add a pinch or 2 of sugar and then also taste for chili powder. You know, I was saying that blooming the spices really helps bring out a lot of depth from them. And if you add them straight to the liquid, it doesn't extract all the flavor in the same way. That's totally true. But at the same time, a lot of us, me included, are used to that chili powder flavor that's kind of a little more raw. So you might want to add a little bit here now. So you get that really deeper flavor that we built in the beef fat earlier, and then a little bit of the fresher, brighter chili powder now. So I usually go in with about a teaspoon more of chili powder at the end here. You could also add more salt and pepper if you'd like. And if you find this too thick, you can add a little bit more beef broth or water, a 1/4 cup at a time. Or if you find it too thin, I don't think you will, but if you do, then you can let it evaporate away a little bit. Just stir and cook it for another little while until it thickens a bit. That is it. I did say don't simmer it for longer unless you found it not thick enough and you were doing a little bit of extra. I will say though, that leftover day-old chili that's been in the fridge overnight is better than the same day you made it. And that's just because the flavors are like harmonizing, spreading through everything, just becoming like cohesive in a way that happens, you know this, in the fridge overnight in a way that nothing else can do. So if you want to have the best chili ever, make it a day ahead. Put it just in its own pot into the fridge overnight and then just reheat it slowly the next day. It's going to be perfect, but it is delicious right away when you make it too. You're going to love this recipe. It is just perfect, quintessential, classic chili. I will put the link to this recipe in the show notes for this podcast episode, or you can head to cookthestory.com/ROTD and get it there. Everything there is arranged by date, so it's helpful to know that today is February 10th of 2026. I am Christine Pittman from cookthestory.com, thecookful.com, cookfor2.us, and this podcast recipe of the day. I hope you have a great day. Let's get cooking.